just love it. Love it. Hello, amazing humans on the net. It's time for February reading wrap-up. But before we start, a quick explanation why we're in a different location today. We are in my office, and that's just because I am in love with my new wall. You've heard it right. I'm talking about a wall.
You are my beautiful love.
I've got a new accent wall, which is in this dark bottle/olive green. The rest of the walls in my office are white, so this is my accent wall, and I love it so much that now I want to have an accent wall in every single room of my house. Obviously the room's not finished, it's very bare. I need to put up some pictures, but we'll get there. Let's get into the books. So in February I read 9 books, which is a lot for me. I think that was because I was traveling, and when you travel you have that little bit of extra time on the plane and so on. One was a planned holiday. It was just 3 days of skiing in Sierra Nevada in Spain with my family, and the other one was an unplanned trip. I had to go to a funeral in Poland. This was my grandmother who died, my last grandparent, and yes, definitely a bit of an odd month, not just because of the events, but also because of all the reflections that any of your family member passing will cause. Now, in terms of the books I've read, boy oh boy, did I, especially this month, needed the 2 weeks that I usually take to reflect on the books that I've read, because especially one of them caused me a lot of confusion. I'll talk about it in a minute. Let me go in chronological order as always. So I think first in February I finished Melinda French Gates' book, which I don't have because I read it on Kindle, titled The Moment of Lift. I won't talk about it too much here because I did talk about it in my video dedicated to International Women's Day, so go check it out if you're interested. The other book I also talked about in there that I finished in February was this short story collection titled Standing Her Ground, classic short stories by trailblazing women. Really good short story collection of 9 stories by well-known female authors such as Virginia Woolf, Willa Cather, who else is in there? Catherine Mansfield, Elizabeth Gaskell, and so on. My favorite was The Manchester Marriage. Again, if you want to hear more about it, go check out my previous video. And there's one more that I read next that I won't talk about it today, and that's Deborah Levy's Things I Don't Want to Know. The reason why I won't talk about it today is because I want to read the other 2 books in the same trilogy. The trilogy is titled The Living Autobiography. But if you want a glimpse, let me say this. If I was ever a writer, I would like to write like Deborah Levy. This little, very short, what is it? Is it a memoir? Is it a novel? I don't know, I probably would say it's a mix of everything. This is brilliant, and I already have the second book in this trilogy titled The Cost of Living, which I have just picked up from the library, and I can't wait to read it. And then I'll read the third one, The Real Estate, and I might do a separate video actually on Deborah Levy's trilogy because I think it deserves it. So stay tuned. I better put my tea because I've just noticed that I didn't put my books in chronological order as I have read them. So, okay. That's better. So then I read Scaffolding by Lauren Elkin. I'm saying I read, I mean I finally finished. This was a marathon. I have started it in the beginning of January. This is one of those books I had such high hopes for. On the paper, there is everything in here that I should theoretically love. You've got 2 very interesting and super intelligent women as key characters. By the way, we follow 2 different timelines in Paris in the same apartment, 2 couples living 50 years apart, 1 couple living in 1970s, and then 1 couple living there in modern times. But the book really focuses on the female characters, and they're both extremely intelligent, and they both complex and interesting. The other thing that was a great story ingredient in there for me was that there were themes of feminism. There was also theme of modern motherhood, love, sexuality, identity, also generational trauma. There were even some interesting elements of psychoanalysis in there. You have excellent writing, really elegant and very poised type of prose, and yet I struggled with this book. I struggled with this book in a way that it just left me feel exhausted. It was a chore to finish it. Honestly, I'm actually surprised I didn't give up. It is quite a chunky book, and if you were to ask me what it is that I did not like in this book, it's very hard to pinpoint. But after I finished the book, I've learned that the author is a cultural critic, and this is what she does for a living, and this is her debut novel, and suddenly everything fell into place. I think it is written sometimes not like a novel. It lacks a certain pace. For example, the explanations of psychoanalytic theories felt way too excessive. It felt like they were supposed to be an essay. And the two timelines, you know, they sound great on paper, but what happens is you start with the modern times, you get quite invested in the main character, and then the book flips to 50 years before, but that chapter is so much shorter, and then you're surprised again because you flip to the modern times, but then you don't go back to the couple in the 50s. I don't know, I cannot recommend this book to you. I think there are many better books out there if you like the themes that I've just described. Now, this next book, it's actually a novella. It's Daisy Miller by Henry James. Is the book that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. That gave me the most trouble in the sense that I can't decide if I like it or not, which doesn't happen very often. And I think I'm still undecided. This was the first piece of work by Henry James that I've read, and like I said, I feel very conflicted about it in relation to the title character Daisy Miller. And even though she's the title character, actually the book is told from the perspective of Winterbourne, another male character. You will probably have heard of this book, but just very quickly, the premise is that we are in Europe, and this young American man who actually has been living in Geneva for a very long time meets this American lady who is quite different to a typical European lady that you will be expecting in a book, especially set in those times, which is early 19th century, I want to say, but I'm guessing. 1 second, when was it published? 1878, sorry, so second half of 19th century. So I was trying to research this book afterwards, and I did get some context. Henry James was an American writer, but he spent many years in Europe, and so he was fascinated with this contrast between two cultures, American and European. And European culture is presented as this extremely traditional and strict culture. So when Daisy Miller arrives on the scene, she is extremely different in that she's quite outspoken, she is quite flirty, she leaves the house whenever she wants, which in those days in Europe apparently was not a very acceptable thing to do. And I actually really liked Daisy. And the reason why I'm conflicted about this book is because Henry James, I feel like he was trying to portray her in a bit of a negative light. I know a lot of reviews say that he abstained from giving any answers, but this is the sense I'm getting. And I feel like I can also say this because of the ending of the book, which I don't want to talk about because this is going to be a spoiler if you haven't read the book, but let's just say there's a tragic ending. With that ending comes a certain message in that one way of living is good, the other way of living is bad. I didn't like the ending. And also, for me personally, I sometimes think that in this world that is already so divided, this obsession with classes and analysis of different cultures that emphasize the differences rather than similarities, it's just not always helpful. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. Let me know what you think of Daisy Miller. Next we have a book that I absolutely loved and I totally didn't expect it. It's A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. This is a play, and I know plays most of the time are better watched than read, but with this one I inhaled it. And I did start to listen to it on Audible because it's free, but I wouldn't recommend it. I very quickly dropped it and got myself a copy from a library because in the recording they don't read to you anything that happens outside the dialogues, and I find those parts actually playing a key role in the book as well. I'm talking about all the description of the setting and all the movement that happens beyond the dialogue. So for example, I've just opened one page, but we've got Steve saying, "You want it in the papers?" And then you've got in italics, "More laughter and shouts of parting come from the men. Stanley throws the screen door of the kitchen open and comes in." There is a huge chance you will have heard about this book, so I won't talk about the plot, but we do have a variety of these vibrant characters, with Blanche, who is definitely stealing the show in here. She comes to visit her sister Stella after she has lost family estate to creditors, the family estate being based in the south. Blanche is a mixture of different things. She's definitely not innocent. She's a compulsive liar. She flirts with boys and, you know, kisses them before they express their permission to do so. She is a racist as well. She talks to Stella's husband in derogatory way. She's scared of aging. I read somewhere that she is supposed to be this metaphor for post-war America, which was also dysfunctional and broken. But for me, I like to think about Blanche just in her own terms as a character. She is written in a way where, despite everything, we can't help but sympathize with her. And I don't know how Williams did it, but somehow he created this piece of work that you can't stop reading. This is a play and you just gobble it all up. So I'm definitely gonna read his other plays, but also I was thinking it might be worth to go back and read some of Chekhov's plays and Ibsen's plays as well, because both of them I know were great inspiration to Tennessee Williams. Highly recommend if you haven't read it. Next we have Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammad. This was longlisted for Women's Prize for Fiction in 2024. I picked up this book because I saw it in the library. I read first page and I was completely hooked. Unfortunately, that feeling didn't last long. So let's start with the plot. The premise is fantastic. So you've got this young woman, I think she's in her late 30s. She is a Palestinian living in London. She's an actress, but she goes to Palestine to visit her sister, and there she gets involved in a production of Hamlet. So you have this great discourse on the role of art in politically troubled times. You have some fantastic writing, which I adored in some of the places. What did I mark in this book? Which gave me a feeling of missing the bottom step, expecting resistance and losing my balance when there was none. I love that, because that metaphor of missing a bottom step as you walk down the stairs was just so fitting to that particular situation. Oh, and the other one I underlined was a description of one of the characters who was a play director in this book. She seemed to know exactly what she was doing and why. She had an uncomplicated sense of destiny. It was years since that felt that way. I pitied her for her future disappointments. I also envied her for their futurity. I also loved the main character. She felt very realistic, and yes, you have political themes in there obviously, but there are also themes of very much everyday personal life experiences, such as miscarriage, for example, and unsuccessful relationships. Despite all this, this book, similar to Scaffolding, felt like a chore at some point. I did finish it, but this is definitely not page turner. It is extremely slow. It just tells you that sometimes you can have all the good elements in a book and still that book may not work for you. This book was highly praised by lots of YouTubers, and some of them even said that this was their favorite to win Women's Prize for Fiction last year, which I would be very disappointed about because I think Brotherless Night is years apart from this book in terms of storytelling and being able to engage reader in a book and get them invested into the characters. So yes, I really wanted to love it, but I didn't. Next we have another modern classic, Laurie Lee's A Rose for Winter, Travels in Andalusia. I chose this book because I knew I was going to south of Spain and I wanted to read something about that region, and on that basis I picked up this book. I really enjoyed reading it while in Spain. I didn't manage to finish it while there because I was reading another book at the same time, but I did finish it after I got home. This, excuse me, is a travel memoir, if there is such thing. Is there a such thing? Travel memoir? It's definitely not, fiction. It was published in 1955. This guy, Laurie Lee, did a lot of traveling in his time. And he may have another book about his previous travels to Spain as well. Laurie Lee has a special way to describe places. If you read this book and you don't feel like you immediately have to pack your suitcase and go to Seville or to Granada, then you're not human. Let me read you a quick paragraph on Seville. So Seville remains favored and sensual, exuding from the banks of its golden river a miasma of perpetual excitement, compounded of those appetites that are most particularly Spanish: chivalry, bloodshed, poetry, and religious mortification. I'm sold. Are you? Also, the people in the book are described in a sometimes very humorous way, and there is generally a bit of a humor in this book, which I really appreciated. There's one paragraph in which Laurie meets this bar owner who makes him taste lots of different wines, and one of the wines is described in this way: with this you could wash the dead and they would resurrect themselves. So funny. So yes, this was a nice little break in between my standard types of books, and like it says on the cover, I think Laurie Lee really does justice when it comes to describing the vitality and pride of the Spanish people and the country. And finally, we've got Nicci French's latest novel, only just published in January, titled The Last Days of Kira Millan. By the way, I have just realized that 5 of my February reads come from library, which just tells you what a library fanatic I am. This needs to go back because another person is waiting for it. So here we've got an unreliable character, we've got a murder, we've got some very likable and extremely unlikable characters. If you've been on this channel, you know that I love Nicci French's duo. This is husband and wife writing books together. I have read every single book. With this one though, I almost gave up, and I was thinking to myself, maybe this is the last book by Nicci French that I'm reading, because it felt too, I don't want to say simple, maybe predictable at times, but I'm glad I persevered, because actually halfway through the book it really picked up, and the second half I think I read in one day because I couldn't stop reading it. Not because I wanted to find out who did it. As with most of the books, you actually, by the end of the book, you're not that interested in who committed the crime, but you're so invested in main characters that you just want to see what happens to them. You want to make sure they're okay. And yes, as always with Nicci French, they have a special knack for, first of all, writing great unreliable female characters, but generally in writing female characters in a way that is extremely satisfying, because apart from the main character, you've got a detective whom I have really come to like. She was also the detective in the previous book titled, has anyone seen Charlotte Salter, I believe? But you don't have to read that book first to understand this one. They have common characters, or one character, but actually two different stories. But yes, great female character writing. I talked about Frida Klein, which was my favorite female detective in the Frida Klein series, in the video about books I'm recommending for International Women's Day. Same as with Detective Maud. You know, these key female characters are highly intelligent, banging their heads against the stereotypes and the discrimination and the societal norms set in whatever environment they operate. If you are looking for a nice, quick, engaging, easy read in between maybe all the literary fiction, I'm confident to say you won't regret picking this up, especially if you like psychological thrillers. That's all my February reading. Some of you may remember that I promised myself that in February I would start War and Peace, but I haven't done that yet. So yeah, I'm sorry, Tolstoy, but you'll have to wait a little bit longer. I blame all these fantastic books that I come across in the local libraries and secondhand bookstores. I might also read a couple of shortlisted Women's Prize for Fiction novels in the next couple of months. So yes, War and Peace will have to wait, because when I start reading it, I want to make sure that I'm fully dedicated to it. I want to finish the library books that I have that need to go back, including Panenka, which I'm reading right now, and classic titled Hetty Dorval, and I'm also about to start The Safe Keep, which I was lucky to find on a library shelf, and I'm sure there's a queue for that book because now it's been longlisted for Women's Prize. So I will finish that, and then I promise you, Tolstoy, that I will reach for War and Peace. I almost forgot, but we have to talk about the word of the month. You will remember in my previous monthly wrap-up, I said that I would mention an interesting word that I haven't come across before, but I found in one of the books. And so this month, that word is, and I hope I will pronounce it correctly, execrable. I asked my husband, who is a native English speaker, whether he knew that word, and he said he didn't. So I thought, oh, interesting. I don't feel so bad now. That word I found in a short story from this book, Standing Her Ground, and it was a short story by Virginia Woolf titled A Society. Really cool, highly intelligent short story. If you have a chance to find it somewhere and read it, then I highly recommend it. But execrable means something is very bad, almost detestable. And so you could say, for example, a crime can be execrable. You could also use it as an adverb, which is execrably. So you could say he was treated execrably, or I could say I play football execrably. But yes, interesting word. Thank you, Virginia Woolf, and I look forward to using it with my teenagers and seeing their faces when I use it. That's it for today. I hope these reviews help you, and if they do, please consider subscribing or commenting or liking my video. It really helps my tiny channel. Thank you all of the 142 subscribers for being here. I truly appreciate you, and feel free to let me know what content you would like to see. I do have a couple of videos that I have been working in the background that are just a little bit more time consuming. One is a tour of the British Library, which I think is the second largest library in the world. And the other video is a deep dive into different classics publications, which I know can be a bit of a minefield, and I know when I started to buy classic books I was a bit overwhelmed, so I hope you will find it helpful. But yes, if you want to see anything else, please do let me know, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.